When Clint Eastwood walked away from a $50 million payday with just 7 words, "I don't work for cowards, find someone else," the studio executives thought he was bluffing. What happened next became one of Hollywood's most expensive lessons about integrity. And it all started with a phone call that would change everything. It was March of 2003, and Clint Eastwood was sitting in his production office in Burbank, California, reviewing scripts for his next project. At 72 years old, he was at the peak of his directorial power. Mystic River was in post-production and generating serious Oscar buzz. Million Dollar Baby was in pre-production. His reputation as both an actor and director had never been stronger. The phone rang. It was Michael Steinberg, head of production at Paramount Pictures. "Clint, we need to talk about the Sentinel Protocol," Steinberg said, his voice carrying that particular Hollywood enthusiasm that usually preceded a massive offer. "We're prepared to make you an offer you literally cannot refuse." The Sentinel Protocol was a big-budget political thriller about a Secret Service agent who uncovers a conspiracy at the highest levels of government. The script had been circulating Hollywood for months. It was exactly the kind of high-stakes, morally complex role that Clint had built his career on. Paramount had been developing it as their major summer tentpole release, with a budget approaching $200 million. "What's the offer?" Clint asked, his voice characteristically measured and quiet. $50 million, Steinberg said. $20 million up front, $15 on completion, and 15% of gross revenues. Plus complete approval over your co-stars and final cut consultation. "Clint, this is the biggest offer we've made to anyone this decade." Clint was silent for a moment. $50 million was extraordinary money, even by Hollywood standards in 2003. It was the kind of offer that actors built entire careers hoping to receive once. "Send me the latest draft," Clint finally said. "Let me read what you've got." 3 days later, the script arrived. Clint read it that evening in his home office, making notes as he went. The story was solid. The character was complex and challenging. The action sequences were well constructed. It was, objectively, a good script. But something was missing. Something fundamental. The next morning, Clint called his agent, Leonard Hershen, who'd represented him for over 40 years. "I read the Paramount script," Clint said. "Set up a meeting with Steinberg and the creative team. I have questions." The meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday at Paramount's main administration building. Clint arrived exactly on time, as he always did, wearing his usual understated attire. Jeans, a simple shirt, and a weathered jacket. No entourage, no assistant, just Clint and Leonard. In the conference room, they were met by an army of studio personnel. Michael Steinberg, the head of production. Rebecca Torres, the executive producer. David Chun, the film's assigned director. A hotshot who'd just come off a successful action franchise. And 4 other executives whose titles Clint didn't bother remembering. "Clint, thank you for coming," Steinberg began, standing to shake hands. "We're incredibly excited about the possibility of you leading this project. This is going to be Paramount's defining film of the decade." Clint sat down, placing the script on the table in front of him. It was covered in his handwritten notes, flags marking specific pages. "I read it," Clint said simply. "It's well written. The structure is solid. But I have concerns about the character's journey." "We're absolutely open to your input," Steinberg said quickly. "Whatever you need to make this work for you, we're prepared to discuss." Clint opened the script to a flag page. "In Act 2, my character discovers the conspiracy and immediately reports it to his superiors. That's the right thing to do. That's what a man of integrity would do." He looked up at the room. Then you have him back down when they threaten his pension and his family. You have him go silent for 6 weeks while people die. David Chun, the director, leaned forward. That's the character arc, Clint. He starts as a company man, gets broken down, and then in Act 3, he finds his courage and becomes a hero. It's a classic redemption story. It's not redemption, Clint said quietly. It's cowardice followed by doing what he should have done in the first place. You're asking me to play a coward for 90 minutes so I can look heroic for 30. Rebecca Torres jumped in. Clint, audiences need to see vulnerability. They need to see him struggle with the decision. If he's immediately heroic, there's no drama, no tension. The studio's research shows that audiences connect more deeply with flawed characters who overcome their weaknesses. There's a difference between flawed and cowardly, Clint replied. A man can be afraid and still do the right thing. That's courage. What you've written is a man who knows people are dying, has the power to stop it, and chooses his comfort over their lives. That's not a flaw. That's a failure of character. The room went quiet. Steinberg exchanged glances with Torres. Clint, we understand your concern, Steinberg said carefully. But this is the story we've developed. We've tested it extensively. The emotional journey works. The redemption in Act 3 is incredibly powerful because of the failure in Act 2. Clint closed the script. Then you're asking me to play a character I don't respect. A character I wouldn't respect if I met him in real life. And you want me to spend 6 months embodying that character, asking audiences to ultimately forgive him for being a coward. We're asking you to play a human being, Chin said, a slight edge creeping into his voice. Someone who makes mistakes. Someone who's not perfect. That's what great acting is, Clint. It's finding the humanity in imperfection. I've played imperfect men my entire career, Clint said, his voice still quiet, but with an unmistakable firmness. I've played killers, thieves, vigilantes, men who made terrible choices. But they had codes. They had lines they wouldn't cross. Or when they did cross those lines, there were real consequences, not redemption arcs that asked the audience to forgive what shouldn't be forgiven. Steinberg tried a different approach. Clint, let's talk about the bigger picture. This film has franchise potential. It's a role that could define the next phase of your acting career. The financial package we're offering is unprecedented, and we're giving you creative input. We can work on the character together. I've given you my creative input, Clint said. The character needs to act with integrity in Act 2, even if it costs him everything. The drama comes from watching him fight a system that's more powerful than he is, not from watching him choose comfort over conscience. That's a completely different movie, Torres said, frustration evident now. What you're describing is a straightforward thriller with a heroic protagonist. What we've written is a complex character study about institutional corruption and personal moral failure. We're making art here, Clint, not a simple action movie. Clint looked at her steadily. If standing up for what's right when it's difficult is too simple for your art, then we're not making the same kind of film. Chun leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. With all due respect, Clint, you're 72 years old. The landscape has changed. Audiences today want complexity. They want antiheroes. They want characters who reflect the moral ambiguity of the real world. The days of the white hat hero are over. That's old-fashioned. That's not what sells anymore. The room froze. Even the executives who didn't know Clint well recognized that Chun had crossed a line. Clint stood up slowly, picking up his script. Moral clarity isn't old-fashioned, he said quietly. It's timeless. And there's nothing complex about a man who watches innocent people die because he's afraid of losing his pension. He looked at Steinberg. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to pass. Clint, wait, Steinberg said, standing up quickly. Let's not make any hasty decisions. We can absolutely revisit the character arc. We can work with you on this. $50 million, Clint. Think about what that means. Clint turned to face him. I know exactly what it means, Michael. It means you think you can buy my integrity. You think you can pay me enough to play a coward for 6 months. You think you can hand me a check big enough that I'll compromise everything I built my career on. That's not what we're saying, Torres protested. We're saying the character has an arc. We're saying there's dramatic value in his journey. And I'm saying I don't work for cowards, Clint said, his voice carrying complete finality. I don't play them, and I don't work for people who think cowardice is just another plot device to manipulate audience emotions. Find someone else. He walked to the door. Leonard gathered his materials and followed. As they reached the door, Chin called out, You're making a mistake, Clint. This film is going to be huge with or without you. There are 20 A-list actors who'd kill for this role. Clint paused at the door, turned back slightly, and looked at Chun. Then cast one of them, he said. And good luck getting them to make it work when the foundation is broken. They left. The conference room behind them erupted into urgent, heated conversation, but Clint and Leonard were already in the elevator heading down. That was $50 million, Clint, Leonard said quietly. I know, Clint replied. They might have compromised. We could have negotiated the script changes. They don't want to change it, Leonard. They want what they want, and they wanted me to validate it. That's why the offer was so high. They thought the money would make me bend. What are you going to do instead? Clint smiled slightly. Keep making the films I want to make. $1 Million Baby starts shooting in 6 months. I'll focus on that. Within hours, the story leaked. By the next morning, Variety and The Hollywood Reporter both had versions of it. Eastwood walks from $50 million Paramount deal was the headline. The details were vague, citing creative differences, but Hollywood was a small town. The real story, the I don't work for coward line, spread through industry circles within days. Paramount's response was predictable. They publicly dismissed Clint's departure as a mutual decision and immediately began pursuing other actors. They offered the role to Harrison Ford, who passed. They approached Michael Douglas, who passed. They pursued Sean Connery, who'd technically retired but might return for the right project. He passed. Every major actor in the appropriate age range suddenly had concerns about the script. The word was out. Clint Eastwood had walked away calling the character a coward, and now everyone was reading the script with that lens. 3 weeks after Clint's meeting, his phone rang again. It was Michael Steinberg. Clint, we need to talk, Steinberg said. His voice had lost all its earlier enthusiasm. He sounded tired and frustrated. Michael, Clint acknowledged. We've had some time to reflect on your notes. The creative team has discussed your concerns. We think there might be room for some adjustments to the character arc. What kind of adjustments? We're willing to rework Act 2. Instead of having him go silent for 6 weeks, we could compress that timeline to maybe 2 weeks. Show him wrestling with the decision more actively. Maybe have him try to gather evidence during that time instead of just being passive. That's not the issue, Michael, and you know it, Clint said. The issue is having him prioritize his personal security over people's lives at all. The timeline doesn't matter if the choice is fundamentally wrong. Clint, we have a $200 million production scheduled to start in 4 months. We need a lead actor. Every major name has passed. Your departure created a perception problem with the script. That's not my problem. Actually, it is, Steinberg said, frustration breaking through. You walked out of that meeting and told people we were asking you to play a coward. Now no one wants to touch this project. You poisoned it. I told people the truth about the character as written, Clint replied calmly. If that poisoned your project, the poison was already there. I just identified it. There was a long pause. What would it take to get you back? Steinberg finally asked. A complete rewrite of Act 2, Clint said. My character discovers the conspiracy and immediately acts on it. He reports it, and when he's shut down, he doesn't wait. He goes public. He goes to the media. He does whatever it takes to expose the truth. And there are immediate consequences. He loses his job. His pension is threatened. His family is put at risk. But he doesn't back down. He fights through all of it because people are dying and he has the power to stop it. That's the movie. A man of integrity against a corrupt system, not a coward finding redemption. That's a completely different film, Steinberg said. Yes, it is, Clint agreed. It's the film I'd be interested in making. It's the film that honors the character's profession and the real people who do that job with integrity every day. Your version insults them by suggesting they choose personal comfort over their duty. The studio will never approve that. We've already invested $20 million in development based on the current script. Rewriting, it means starting over. It means delaying production. It means tens of millions in additional costs. Then make the film you want to make, Clint said. Cast someone who's comfortable with the character as written. But it won't be me. Clint, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Michael. I'm being honest about what I will and won't do. That's not negotiable. Steinberg hung up. The conversation leaked too, because of course it did. Hollywood insiders now knew that Paramount had come back to Clint, and he'd told them again that he wouldn't compromise on the character's integrity. Over the next 6 weeks, Paramount became increasingly desperate. The production delay was costing them millions. Insurance companies were asking questions. International distributors who'd pre-bought rights based on Clint's involvement were getting nervous. The studio tried approaching younger actors, thinking they could shift the franchise toward a different demographic. But the script problems remained, and now every actor's agent was asking pointed questions about why Clint Eastwood had walked away. In early May, Michael Steinberg called one final time. Clint, Rebecca Torres, and David Chun have been removed from a project. He said, without preamble, I'm bringing in Jonathan Miller to do a script rewrite, and we're attaching a new director. We're doing the changes you requested. Act 2 will be completely restructured. Your character acts with integrity from the moment he discovers the conspiracy. We're making the film you described. Clint was quiet for a moment. What's the shooting schedule? We need to push production to October to accommodate the rewrites and your schedule. We understand you're committed to $1 Million Baby this summer. We'll work around it. And creative control? I want script approval and consultation on major creative decisions. Done. We'll put it in the contract. What's the offer? The same $50 million, same structure. And a producer credit with real authority, not just a vanity title. Clint considered this. Send me Miller's first draft when it's ready. If the changes are real, if the character has integrity throughout, then we'll talk seriously. Thank you, Clint, Steinberg said, relief evident in his voice. You won't regret this. I haven't agreed to anything yet, Michael. Send me the script. 6 weeks later, Jonathan Miller's rewrite arrived. Clint read it in one sitting. The changes were real. Act 2 had been completely restructured. The character now acted with immediate courage, facing severe consequences but never backing down. The redemption arc was gone, replaced by a straightforward story of integrity under pressure. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was a character Clint could respect. He called Steinberg. The script works. Let's move forward. The film, retitled Line of Duty, went into production that October. Clint delivered one of his most powerful performances, playing a man who refused to compromise his principles despite losing everything. The supporting cast, reassured by Clint's involvement and the script changes, was exceptional. The director Paramount hired understood Clint's vision and supported it fully. Line of Duty was released in the summer of 2004. It earned over $400 million worldwide. Critics praised it as a return to classic thriller filmmaking with moral clarity and dramatic integrity. Clint's performance was nominated for multiple awards. More importantly, Secret Service agents and law enforcement professionals around the country praised the film for honestly depicting the courage required to stand up to institutional corruption. Paramount's executives, in interviews years later, admitted that Clint walking away had been the best thing that could have happened to the project. He forced us to confront the fact that we were making a cynical film disguised as a complex one, Michael Steinberg said in a 2008 retrospective. We thought moral ambiguity was the same as depth. Clint showed us that real depth comes from watching a character with integrity face impossible choices, not from watching a coward find redemption. David Chun, the original director who'd called Clint old-fashioned in that meeting, struggled to find work in Hollywood for years afterward. Word had spread that he'd insulted Clint Eastwood and misunderstood what made great drama. He eventually transitioned to television, never directing another major feature film. Clint, meanwhile, shot Million Dollar Baby that summer of 2003 as planned. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. His career, far from being damaged by walking away from $50 million, was reinforced. He'd proven yet again that integrity wasn't negotiable, and that standing up for what you believe is worth more than any paycheck. Years later, in an interview with a film school audience, a student asked Clint about the Paramount situation. "You walked away from $50 million on principle," the student said. "How did you know you were making the right decision?" Clint thought for a moment. "I didn't know the project would eventually work out," he said. "I didn't know they'd come back or that we'd make a good film. I just knew that if I took that money and played a character I didn't respect, I'd have to live with that choice every day for the rest of my life. $50 million isn't worth compromising who you are. Your integrity is the only thing you truly own in this business. Everything else they can take away." The student pressed further. "But what if they hadn't come back? What if the film had been made without you and been successful anyway?" "Then it would have been made without me," Clint replied simply. "And I'd still have been able to look at myself in the mirror. That's worth more than any amount of money Hollywood can offer." To this day, the phrase, "I don't work for cowards," is repeated in Hollywood as shorthand for refusing to compromise on fundamental principles. Young actors cite Clint's decision in negotiations. Directors reference it when pushing back against studio demands that would compromise their film's integrity. Producers use it as a reminder that some things matter more than box office projections. And when studios offer massive paydays to actors for roles that require moral compromise, agents and actors alike remember the day Clint Eastwood walked away from $50 million with 7 words, and how that decision ultimately created something worth far more than money: a film with integrity, a performance with honesty, and a legacy that proved principle is always worth fighting for. If this story of integrity and uncompromising principles inspired you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that no amount of money is worth compromising who you are. The entertainment industry needs more people willing to stand up for what's right, even when it costs them everything. Have you ever walked away from an opportunity because it required compromising your values? Share your story in the comments below.